Hi. So, my name is Sharon Hughes, and I'm a coach and a trainer. And a few years ago, I was asked to deliver a presentation to a group of young people on working with anxiety and building a toolkit around different ways for coping with anxiety. So, I prepared the following workshop, which I've delivered to a number of groups over a number of different years. And it's something I feel really strongly about. So, I've wanted to just pop it online for a little while, so I have a little bit of time right now, so I thought I would put it up. So basically, this is for anyone who's interested in kind of a 101 introduction to anxiety. And also, if you're a sufferer or you know someone who suffers, you might just be able to pick up a few tips on some of the kind of untalked about side effects of anxiety and how it can affect sufferers, although I don't like the word sufferers, but moving on. So, this presentation is being given by me. So, my name is Sharon Hughes. I am a life, business, and career coach. They're my handles if you're interested in them. I just have to start with a disclaimer. Anything I have learned about anxiety is either through my own experiences of having anxiety or things that I have learned colloquially. I am not a mental health professional, I am not a healthcare professional, and those are really serious jobs, and I really believe in them. The stuff I'm talking about here is more of a prevention is better than cure stuff. There are people who their anxiety reaches a point where they need professional medical attention, including and up to medication, and that is quite all right. Whatever you need to do to get through anxiety, it is horrible. So, no judgment here. So, I'm not a health professional. I don't claim to be. These are just my own personal experiences, and I would also advocate that if you are in difficulty and if you're struggling, go to a doctor and try and get some help. So that would be my main thing that I would say. So today's workshop, obviously you're not here, so I won't be going into depth in some parts. That would be more interactive. But there's two main parts. I just want to introduce you to the science of anxiety, because I think a lot of people understand that they have anxiety, but I don't think they understand why they have anxiety or where it comes from. And for me, I found understanding why my body was having the reactions that it was really helped me just understand things better. And then the second thing is actually building an anxiety toolkit. I would clarify at this point, I don't believe you can cure anxiety. I don't believe that that's what it is. But I do think it can be managed. Again, not for everybody, but I do think people can build up a fairly robust system for managing it when you do have darker periods. So the rules in all of my workshops is there's no such thing as stupid questions. It's free to be kind. Also, when talking about anxiety, I'm always really keen to point out that this is not a class where you can learn new things to worry about, because sometimes people with anxiety are like, oh my god, is that anxiety? I've been doing it wrong. Now I need to worry about that on top of the thing I'm already worried about. So don't do that. Also, what happens in the room stays in the room. That's not kind of relevant here. And then the same, I have to say this, like, there's so much stuff on the internet. There's going to be no one size fits all for anything that you do. So take what you want, leave what you don't. If you find one little nugget of information, you're like, oh, I remember that girl said that thing about that other thing. Brilliant. But if none of it's relevant to you, that is okay too. So, who am I? I'm a super serial person. So, I'm a lot of things, and we tend to qualify ourselves. Daughter, dog servant, wife, mother, CEO, friend, trainer, gardener, coach, blogger. I'm all of those things, but I also have anxiety. So I have high performing anxiety, because did you know there's lots of different types of anxiety? Um, so yeah, it's just who I am. Um, I always was a worrier. As a child, I think A lot of it was down to some good old Catholic guilt. And in my 20s, when I was drinking, I used to get the fear really bad, to the point that my friends would text me um, the following morning after a night out to say, by the way, before you even asked, you didn't do anything, crazy. Um, well, I did crazy stuff, but nothing bad. So eventually it got so bad I stopped drinking. I had like a 4-day fear hangover. And I was just like, I can't keep doing this to myself. So I quit drinking. And that definitely put it to bay for a little while. But then in 2011, I think, or 2012, I realised that it was actually completely untriggered. It was just starting, and I eventually ended up having an anxiety probably episode, a really bad one. And at that point I was like, right, stop. Just stop. Like, you've got to get this sorted out. And I decided I was going to tackle it head on. So I'm a bit of an oddball. I like to set myself goals. So I decided that I was going to do my best to fix this. So I made 2 commitments to myself. One was that I would learn everything I could about anxiety, that I would understand why things were happening to me, how they were happening to me, why my body was reacting. And the second thing was that I would put it to good use. And you will see as we go along how that came about. But that would include the fact that I feel comfortable enough doing this presentation. So just to put it in perspective, I made this commitment to myself in winter 2012, and winter 2018 was quite easily my easiest winter. I've always found winter to be the hardest. November has just been like the death month for me. But this winter was the first winter that I actually got through without any untriggered anxiety episodes. Like, you can't live without anxiety because stuff happens and you have to deal with that. But it was the first winter that I can remember that I actually, like, my emotional health stayed really great for the winter. So what I have learned has benefited me, but that doesn't mean that it will benefit you. And I would throw in a caveat that that's 6 years and I'm still learning. So there you have it. So the first part we're going to look at is the science. So what is anxiety? It is termed as the distress or uneasiness of the mind caused by fear or danger of misfortune. So a very, very oversimplified way of looking at things is that depression is it's a kind of like where you're dwelling on the past, and anxiety is where you're worrying about the future. And one of the best things I heard was one of my coaches said to me that anxiety was like paying interest on a loan that you hadn't even taken out. But you see, I reckon you already knew that, because if you are here and you are looking at this, you're probably having some of the feelings yourself, or else you are seeing somebody close to you in your life that is having them. There are 2 main classes of them. The general anxiety disorder, I call them the all-round heebie-jeebies, and social anxiety disorder. So these are people-triggered heebie-jeebies. So crowds, public speaking, social gatherings. Now, I have a disclaimer written up there because one of my coping mechanisms is to watch my language around anxiety. So early on, I found it very difficult to say I'm having an anxiety episode or I'm having an anxiety attack. And what ended up happening was I started using the word anxiety interchangeably. So people would say to me, oh, don't be worried about that. Or I was misinterpreting situations which I now know were nerves or stress with anxiety. So I, over the years, have become extremely conscious of my language. And one of the things that I do as a coping mechanism to undermine the severity of the anxiety is to actually use quite generic language. So things like the heebie-jeebies, because I find with people around me as well, it doesn't worry them as much. So I'll just come in and say, oh, I'm having the heebie-jeebies about something, and that way then when I do say, okay, I'm in full scale anxiety, they actually know, oh my god, she's serious now. So I don't use the language to be in any way derogatory, And if it's not something that you feel comfortable with, that is fine. But this is one of my coping mechanisms, and it's my workshop. So I don't think as well that a lot of people understand that phobias are actually on the anxiety spectrum, and so is OCD. So I would have some OCD tendencies, very very small, but I would have some rituals like how I lock the front door, and if I've left my straighteners on. I didn't understand that they were connected. I thought it was a worry thing. I only found out when I really started reading into it what had happened there. So that's what anxiety is. Who has anxiety? Everyone. Joke ish. They are the most common mental health issue, along with depression in Ireland and the EU. They account for a similar level of stress and disability within society as cancer or heart disease. It's difficult to prove, but they estimate that 1 in 9 people will suffer from an anxiety disordering in their lifetime, and America estimates it to be around 18%, which is 1 in 5 people of the American population. Very few people seek treatment, so the number's probably way higher, or people learn to cope, or it becomes their new normal, or whatever it might be. But like, when I started being open about my anxiety, I couldn't believe the amount of people that were having it too. It's definitely a female thing as well. So yeah, I would put the number higher. So here's the question: why does anxiety exist? So it's actually to save our village from saber-toothed tigers. I wish I was joking, but basically, people with anxiety have a higher they're better tuned. If you show a person with anxiety a picture of 100 faces, of which 99 are smiling and one of them is frowning, a person with anxiety will spot the one that's frowning like so much quicker than a person who doesn't have any sort of anxiety issues. So if you think back to years gone by, like the person with anxiety, their job in the tribe was to be super suspicious that there was a tiger coming up. And you know what? 1 times out of 10, they were probably right. So that's how it actually works. It is 100% connected to your fight and flight reaction. It's an adrenaline system. But the problem with anxiety is that sometimes the threat of maybe having an anxiety episode can actually bring on worse anxiety, and at that point you are in a kind of an adrenaline loop. And I know for me, then I would get anxiety hangovers because you've literally wasted your fight and flight. All your adrenaline has gone through you. That's why you need to go to the loo. It's the exact same kind of reaction. So what causes the anxiety? There's a history of mental health. It can be a personality trait, ongoing stressful events, a particular stressful event, physical health issues, substance abuse, or just general mental health issues. The symptoms are altered physical sensations like palpitations and nausea. Anxiety normally hits in the chest or the stomach, I find. The altered thoughts, oh my god, the altered thoughts, completely irrational thinking. And I think understanding that it's irrational is definitely key to getting yourself out of it. Worry, just worrying about worrying. If I don't worry, who else will worry? Altered behaviour, restless, avoidance. Some of my finest work was created during periods of stress for me, because if I need to get something done, avoiding worrying is like it's like crack cocaine for me. Like, it'll keep me going for days. Altered emotions, so fear and panic. So anxiety is like it'll get in there. Like there's nothing that it won't affect. The side effects people don't talk about. So I have missed out on amazing experiences in my life, like maybe wanting to do a J1 or go traveling, because of being anxious about how I would cope in a new situation. The embarrassment. It is so embarrassing trying to tell people that you are worried about something that you know is stupid. But my God, like, you also know it's going to happen. The extreme people pleasing. I have spoken to so many people about this, but when you're anxious, you're so concerned that you have upset people that you tend to go out of your way to take shit from people that you probably shouldn't take. The ill health, because like if you're experiencing nausea, you're not eating properly, so you're not nourished properly, you're not sleeping properly, then you hit exhaustion. It's a pretty crappy place to be. So here are some ways that I have found to build a toolkit to help with my own anxiety management. So I set myself rules again, freak. I was to try everything once, right? So any article that I read that said, oh, I swam in the Dead Sea and rubbed Epsom salts on my hair twice a day on a Tuesday, I was like, you know what? Don't diss it till you try it. That's why, especially on my blog, you'll see that there is a lot of things that I have tried that might not seem rational. I was also decided that I was committed to seeking the solution, not waiting for it. I waited 5 years to get over it or to grow out of it or whenever it wasn't happening. And the other thing was that I would do one thing every single day in order to make the changes to address what was going on in my life. So there are two parts of this. So people talk about self-care a lot. And self-care is like the practice of taking the steps to look after yourself. Okay, so self-care is like, oh, I should get massages, I should have a float, I should ring my friends more. Self-management, and I think this is where we're probably not talking about things as much as we should, but self-management is where you actually develop a plan or a program to help you improve, develop, or enhance your quality of life. So self-care is a concept, self-management is a plan. If you are struggling with anxiety, I would suggest you up a gear from self-care into self-management, because self-care on its own is nice, but in my experience it won't achieve an outcome without a managed program for it to work and to be part of a larger holistic piece. So my own self-care plan, meditation. I am so bad at meditation. I'm trying to learn again because I recently read Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now, and I am determined to learn how to do it. But oh my God, there is nothing like trying to sit quietly to remind you that your brain is a puppy with ADD on acid after drinking Coke. Like, it's just like, peace. Oh my God, did I pay that bill? Peace. You know, do they have toilets on Star Trek? Journaling. Journaling I've tried. I liked it, didn't love it. Having a child, not conducive with journaling. Personal development books, I love reading. I love books. I just had some really good ones. TED Talks, there are thousands of TED Talks, not just TED but TEDx as well, and there's loads of people with little tidbits on how they coped, so I found them really useful. Mindfulness, I do not like meditate mindfulness, but I've done a lot of work around being mindful of what I am thinking. I'll get into that a bit more later. Yoga, not for me, ain't no Russian gymnast here. Diet, yeah, I to the point that I take vitamin D tablets in particular during the winter if I'm feeling a bit low. Alcohol, if you're struggling, it's definitely worth considering giving it up. Reiki, I don't do it regularly, but I've had it done. A sleep routine. Oh my God, that is my number one. I go to bed at a certain time, I get up at a certain time, and I nap whenever I can. I love sleep. Love it. Do it. Music. Oh, like you forget how much power music has over you. You know, like just a really happy playlist or a really somber playlist, whatever it might be. NLP is called neuro linguistic programming, and this was a big part of my self recovery. It's basically, NLP is how your brain thinks, and understanding NLP means that you can start retraining your brain how to think. So when I think about mindfulness, I would connect it with NLP insofar as I started checking my negative thoughts and understanding what I was doing. The next thing was thinking positive. I've read a lot on thinking positive. It's probably one of the most overused phrases. If you happen to mention to somebody new that you're feeling anxious, they usually go, "You just gotta stay positive." And there's no such thing as positive thinking. There is such thing as positive thinking. It doesn't work because there's no such thing as a positive world. It's a null concept. Now, there are definitely ways of, I would consider it realistic thinking. So instead of thinking everyone's out to get you, thinking, they're probably not arse, they're probably just worried about themselves. So it's not positive thinking, but it's more practical. So neutral thinking. Self-love just sounds so cooey, but like just being nice to yourself, that has been really, really big for me. Talking to others, I think when I started being properly honest about my anxiety with other people, they found it easier to be honest with me. Oppositional thinking, this is what I think people mean when they're talking about it. So oppositional thinking, I kind of blew my mind when I found out about it. It is physically impossible, try it now, to think two things at the same time. So if you're thinking about baking bread, you cannot think about, what you are going to wear to work tomorrow. Your brain will stop doing one to do the other. This is science. This is not just me, right? So basically, a really simple way of using that to your advantage is knowing that, and again, this comes back to neuro-linguistic programming, whenever you have a negative thought, you immediately replace it with a positive one. Laughter, oh my God, like anything that is fun, do it if it's legal and safe. But in general, random acts of kindness, I would include in that charitable giving as well. I use a resource called Kiva where you can donate money to women or men in other parts of the world, and you essentially make a social entrepreneur loan and they pay back over time. And I just always find when I go in and have a look at some of the struggles sometimes, and I absolutely don't mean this all the time, but sometimes a reminder that you are experiencing first world problems, for me, I found to be an equalizer, very much a whole, okay, if I'm having anxiety in this scenario, God love those people. Aromatherapy is not science. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. I love it, but I love it within the context of knowing that it's not science. I think over time your brain can get trained. For me, I have a really strong sense of smell, so I love having incense burning and stuff in the house. So for me, lavender means I'm trying to relax, lemon means I'm trying to concentrate, and I've other, smells. So I enjoy setting the mood, but like I wouldn't, they don't cure things. Decluttering. Cannot emphasize enough the effect that decluttering had on my life. I have blogged on the KonMari method as well a few times. I didn't realise the effect clutter was having on my life until I got rid of the clutter. out of my life, and I can never go back. I get like minor, and I'm quite messy, untidy now, not dirty, but if there's too much stuff, it just messes with my brain. Breathing, yeah, I think it works for some people, did not work for me. So out of all of those things, quitting alcohol was a huge step, and also like saved me so much money. Affirmations, which is part of my neurolinguistic programming and oppositional thinking. So whenever my brain would go, oh my god, you're gonna die, I would have an affirmation that would say, I trust that I'm in the right place at the right time with the right people, or whatever it might be. Communicating with people, understanding the science. When I realised I was having an adrenaline reaction to things, as opposed, like, so it was chemical instead of brain, it made me realise that I needed to react in a chemical way, so not let myself get that het up. Minding my language. And again, this is where before I used to say, I'm anxious, I'm so anxious, I feel anxious, where now I'm like, I'm mildly stressed. That gave me the heebie-jeebies. One is feeling mildly perturbed, whatever it is, it doesn't matter, but it makes me feel like not everything is anxiety. Some things are just basic things, you know, they're just natural emotional reactions to things that are going on in your life. Power thinking and oppositional thinking. Reading, I mean, there's a book for everything in the world, including the symptoms that you are going through right now. You just need to keep reading until you find it and something speaks to you. And exercise, and my sleep routine as well. Getting fit and healthy. And I am not fit fam. I am fat fam. But getting fit and healthy, minding my diet and sleep, like that whole physical part, there's absolutely no denying the effect that had on my emotional health. So what I've learned along the way is that unless you're very early on in anxiety and it's something that's new and it's been triggered by something that is going away, there's a good chance it's not going away on its own. Number two is that my anxiety experience is unique. So is yours. And that's why I said from the start, like, don't be adding these things to your worries. It isn't curable. And that's what I Googled, like at the start. How do you cure anxiety? But there were changes that I could make that were within my power, and it was up to me to make them. So building the anxiety toolkit includes your own secret weapons. So for me, my first one was science. Cortisol is a sad hormone. Oxytocin is the happy hormone. And if you can make more oxytocin than cortisol, you're going to be in a good place. So the more cortisol that's in your body, the more likely you're going to have an anxiety episode. So happy, good, sad, bad. Now, obviously, if you're having hormonal issues, that's going to affect this as well. Number two is action. Nothing beats fear like action. If you are worried, sitting worrying about being worried is not going to alleviate the worry. And often, especially with fears, just exposing yourself to them diminishes them. So if you're worried that you've upset somebody, sometimes just dropping them a text and saying, did I upset you the other night, or whatever, it's just the easiest thing to do. Know thine enemy, and this is one thing that I definitely do in the workshop. So what I learned from my own coaching was that your anxiety is what's known as, it's frequently called the gremlin in kind of self-help terms. So what they encouraged us to do was have a name, have a kind of like an image in your head of what they look like, but then start going like, what is getting his attention? And sometimes just standing back and observing how your brain is doing things um can really be really super illuminating. So my gremlin's name is Fluffy. So the theory being, make it as ridiculous as you can so that it's easier to kind of go, what? Like, what? Why? A great book on this is called The Chimp Paradox. And he talks about how your chimp is the bit of your brain that runs away with you. So my chimp's name is Esmeralda. She has a bow. What feeds him, what scares him. And getting to know this part of who you are is worth it, because it can help you communicate with it in a way that's useful for you. The next part that I do in the workshop is always, people don't know how to react, but it's to ask people if they can think of 3 positive things about your anxiety and 3 reasons that they respect their anxiety. And most people hate, fear, loathe their anxiety so badly that they never stop to think that there may be something good in it. I took some time, not because I'm, holy or whatever, but I realised that there were some really good things about my anxiety. So one of them is that I have a really pointy moral compass. So my anxiety often manifests in guilt. So if I do something that is against my own moral code, I will have a guilt fit about it. So in order to avoid that, I have a super pointy moral compass. I don't do anything that I feel will go against my own inner judgment. My empathy makes me a really good friend. I think when you suffer from anxiety, you're so busy worrying about bad things happen that when they happen to your friends, you genuinely can feel it for them. Like, you can be like, oh my god, I once had a dream that happened, or that must be the worst thing in the world, or and I think people who suffer from anxiety are extremely empathetic because they care that bad things are going to happen. I am an excellent risk manager. This may or may not count for you, but I worked in event management for years, and you have to do a lot of health and safety paperwork, and risk management is a huge part of the role. And normal people think, risk fire, risk burglary, and I'm like, risk, that's happening on Friday, which is next door to the circus, and that circus has a giraffe, and there will be very, very tall telegraph lines, and if that giraffe gets out, that's a fire. That's a real fire hazard. So my one of my forms of anxiety is called catastrophizing. And ironically, if you're anything to do with risk management, if you're running risky projects, I have already gone through every possible scenario before I've even put pen to paper, because that's how my brain works. But it means that if things happen in real life, I've already prepped for them. And 4 is my anxiety makes me creative. Whether you like it or not, if you have anxiety, you have an amazing imagination. You're worrying about things that haven't even happened. That takes skill. So I just think that's really, I don't think I'm creative, but I am a little bit of a daydreamer in my own head. So I enjoy it. It's because of my imagination. The 2 things are definitely interconnected. So progress is impossible without change, and those who can't change their minds can't change anything. And I put this up not to say this is easy and do it, but I go back to the point that it won't go away on its own. So doing anything might increase your emotional health by 1%, by 10%, by 50%. I don't know what it is, but sitting waiting for that to happen, particularly in my experience, didn't do me any good. So I suppose my challenge to you is to maybe take a little piece of my personal contract and say that you might try anything once. And if you know someone who suffers from anxiety, maybe you can be the person that suggests a shamanic drum healing on a Reiki hillside. True story. Happened. And see how that goes down. So learn everything you can about you and about your anxiety, because again, it's not the same as mine, and then put it to good use. And even if all that is that you can really, really relate to other people with anxiety and support them in their understanding of their journey, even that is a wonderful gift to be able to share with somebody who's genuinely in pain with some of the thought processes that go through your head with anxiety. And make a plan. Make a plan. Self-care is lovely. Self-management is what's going to get you the changes that you want to see in your life, and every step you take will take you closer to whatever goal that might be. Here's just a list of some more resources. Your GP should be able to help. The TED Talks, there's a TED Talk for everything. Blogs, such good bloggers, such good mental health, mental wellness, emotional wellness bloggers, books, videos, articles, friends. Give the alternative therapies a try, if nothing else, just for the giggle factor. Bring a friend with you. But flotation tanks was one thing I was like, that's not a runner for me at all, and I didn't, and it's definitely in the arsenal now. And Google it, find out what you can find. Worrying is like paying a debt that you don't owe, and if you can do anything to relieve yourself of that burden, give it a shot. Try and remember you're not alone. The stats would show that you are in the majority. And I would say anyone who doesn't respect your anxiety doesn't respect you. And we've talked before about people pleasing. And unfortunately, if you are in the dreads of anxiety, it's a place where you can invite toxic people into your life. And if somebody uses your anxiety against you, and I've had it done to me where people would say, oh, when you did that the other day, that really upset, knowing that I would immediately go into hyper apologetic and people pleasing mode. There are supports. Unfortunately, there's not as many as I would like, but they are there. Do try and find them. And remember that providing you're not into clinical or hormonal issues, that's all in your head. It is all in your head, but that's a good thing, because you are 100% control of what goes on in your head. So instead of thinking, oh crap, it's all in my head, start thinking, okay, well, I'm the boss up in here, so I'm going to try and take control of it. And again, if you need help to get there, that's okay too. No judgment here. And then questions. So obviously this is not recorded live, so I'm not going to be able to ask it, but that is my short presentation on how my anxiety affected me and what I have done to try and address it over the last 7 years. God, I actually can't believe it's been 7 years, even though yeah, obviously it has. But I would love to hear from you. So if you have any questions or comments or thoughts or ideas or bizarre holistic methods for me to try, drop me an email. I would love to hear from you. I'm kind of mildly obsessed with anxiety now, now that it's not in control anymore. But do stay in touch. There's all my details. So if you want, you can drop me a question and I'll answer it as best I can. Thank you.